The first warning came at 0347 hours on a cold Tuesday morning in November. Lieutenant Sarah Park was drinking her third cup of coffee when her console lit up with more red dots than she had ever seen in her life. She spilled the coffee across her desk and did not even notice. Her hands were already flying across the keyboard. "Contact," she said. Her voice was calm because she had trained for years to keep it calm, but inside, her heart was beating so fast she thought it might explode. Multiple contacts. Bearing. Everywhere. They're coming from everywhere. The Jupiter Early Warning Station had been built for this exact moment. For 50 years, humanity had been sending signals into space. For 50 years, they had been waiting for an answer. Now the answer had arrived. And it was not a message. It was a fleet. 823 ships dropped out of hyperspace in a perfect formation near Jupiter's moon Europa. They were beautiful, in a terrible way. Each vessel was covered in gold and silver patterns that caught the light of the distant sun. They moved together like a school of fish, turning and adjusting with a grace that human ships could never match. Admiral Chen Wei was asleep in his quarters on the orbital station above Earth when his communicator screamed. He was 62 years old and had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war he hoped would never come. Now, it was here. He dressed in 4 minutes and was in the command center in 6. "Show me," he said. The holographic display filled the room with light. 800 ships. The largest was 3 kilometers long. The smallest was still twice the size of anything humanity had ever built. They were moving toward Earth at a speed that would bring them to the planet in 18 hours. "Do we have any communication?" Chen asked. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies," said Commander Rodriguez. "We can't understand any of it. The translation computers are working, but what? The language structure is completely alien, sir. It could take days, weeks." Chen stared at the display. 800 ships. Humanity had exactly 147 combat-capable vessels. They had orbital defense platforms. They had the experimental Helios array, which had never been tested in actual combat. They had courage and determination and love for their planet. It would have to be enough. "Sound the general alarm," Chen said. "All ships to battle stations. Wake up everyone we have. Call back every vessel from the outer planets. And get me the Secretary General." The next 6 hours were controlled chaos. Ships that had been on patrol near Mars turned and burned toward Earth at maximum acceleration. The crews of the orbital platforms loaded missiles and charged their energy weapons. Pilots climbed into fighters that they knew might become their coffins. Nobody ran. Nobody hid. This was their home, and they would defend it. On Earth, the news spread like fire. People watched the sky even though there was nothing to see yet. Families gathered together. Churches and temples and mosques filled with people praying to whatever gods they believed in. The world had never been so united. For the first time in human history, there were no nations. There was only Earth. Admiral Chen spoke to the Secretary General for exactly 3 minutes. The conversation was simple. "Can you win?" she asked. "I don't know," Chen replied. "But we will fight." "Then fight. The whole world is behind you." Chen closed the communication and turned to his staff. They were young, most of them. Young and scared and trying very hard not to show it. He thought about his daughter, who was 28 now, and pregnant with his first grandchild. He thought about the world that child might grow up in. "Listen to me," he said. "In a few hours we are going to face something no human has ever faced before. We don't know what they want. We don't know if they want to talk or if they want to kill us all. But we know one thing. This is our home. We built it. We fought for it. We bled for it, and we will not give it up without a fight." The officers nodded. Some of them wiped their eyes. None of them looked away. "Today, we show the universe what humanity is made of," Chen continued. "Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for every generation that will come after us. Whatever happens, they will remember this day. They will remember us. Let's give them something worth remembering." The alien fleet did not slow down as it passed Jupiter. It did not respond to any of humanity's attempts at communication. The ships just kept coming, beautiful and silent and terrifying. By the time they reached the orbit of Mars, Chen had positioned his forces as well as he could. The human ships formed a wall between the aliens and Earth. It was a thin wall, pathetically thin, but it was all they had. The orbital platforms were charged and ready. The Helios array. A network of satellites that could focus the sun's energy into a devastating beam was powered up for the first time ever. "All ships report ready," said Commander Rodriguez. Chen nodded. He looked at the display one more time. The alien formation was still perfect. Not a single ship out of place. They moved like they had been doing this for 1,000 years. Maybe they had. "Open a channel," Chen said. "All frequencies." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Chen took a deep breath. "Alien fleet. This is Admiral Chen Wei of Earth's Unified Defense Command. You have entered our solar system without permission or communication. We do not know your intentions, but we are prepared to defend our home. Please respond. Please tell us what you want." Silence. The alien ships did not change course. They did not slow down. They did not respond. "Sir," said the sensor officer, "they're powering up. Something. Energy readings are off the scale." Chen closed his eyes for just a moment. Then he opened them and gave the order that would change everything. "All ships, open fire." The Battle of Seoul began at 1,423 hours and lasted for 17 hours and 23 minutes. It was the largest battle in human history. It was also the first time humans had ever killed beings from another world. The human ships fired everything they had. Missiles streaked across space, leaving trails of fire. Energy weapons carved bright lines through the darkness. The orbital platforms launched wave after wave of drones, each one carrying enough explosives to destroy a building. The Helios array fired for the first time, and a beam of concentrated sunlight punched through an alien ship like a needle through paper. The alien ships did not fire back. At first, no one noticed. There was too much chaos, too much fear, too much adrenaline. The human commanders were focused on their own ships, their own weapons, their own survival. They saw alien vessels exploding and thought they were winning. They did not stop to wonder why their own ships were not exploding too. The first alien ship died 3 minutes into the battle. It broke apart in a shower of golden fragments, and the human crews cheered. The second ship died a minute later. Then the third. Then the fourth. The human weapons were crude compared to the alien technology, but there were so many of them, and the alien ships were not defending themselves. Admiral Chen watched the battle from his command center. He saw his ships taking damage from debris and from their own weapons fire, but not from the enemy. He saw alien vessels trying to turn, trying to run, but being caught and destroyed. He saw escape pods launching from dying ships, tiny dots of light that flickered and went dark as missiles found them. "Why aren't they shooting?" he asked. No one could answer him. The battle continued. Human pilots who had expected to die found themselves still alive, still fighting, still winning. The alien fleet tried to retreat, but the human ships surrounded them. There was no escape. The Helios array fired again and again, each shot destroying another vessel. The orbital platforms launched their last missiles. The fighters hunted down stragglers. By the time the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean, it was over. 823 alien ships had entered the solar system. 0 alien ships remained. Humanity had lost 62% of its fleet. 88 ships destroyed, thousands of lives lost. But they had won. Against impossible odds. Against technology they did not understand. Against an enemy they had never met. They had won. The celebrations began before the last fires had gone out. People poured into the streets all over the world. They waved flags and sang songs and hugged strangers. The fear that had gripped the planet for 18 hours melted away, replaced by a wild, fierce joy. Humanity had faced its first test from the universe, and humanity had passed. Admiral Chen did not celebrate. He sat in his command center and watched the debris field that had once been an alien fleet. He watched the rescue ships searching for survivors, both human and alien. They found human survivors. They did not find alien survivors. "Sir," said Commander Rodriguez, "the Secretary General wants to speak with you. The whole world wants to speak with you. You're a hero." Chen said nothing. He was still watching the debris. Among the twisted metal and shattered hulls, he could see things that did not belong on a warship. Furniture, artwork, things that looked like toys. "Sir, get me Ambassador Tanaka," Chen said quietly. "I need to know what we just did." Outside, the world celebrated the greatest victory in human history. They called it the Battle of Seoul. They called it humanity's finest hour. They made Admiral Chen Wei a legend. They built monuments and wrote songs and told stories about the brave men and women who had defended Earth. They did not know not yet that this was not a victory. They did not know that they had just made the worst mistake in human history. They did not know that the 800 ships they had destroyed were not carrying warriors. They were carrying families. They were carrying gifts. They were carrying hope for a friendship between two species that now would never exist. But they would learn. Soon, they would learn everything, and when they did, the celebrations would stop. The debris field around Jupiter grew cold and dark. Among the wreckage floated the body of a young alien female. She had been 16 years old by her species counting. In her frozen hand, she still held a datapad containing her doctoral thesis on human art. She had spent 3 years studying human paintings, human music, human literature. She had believed that humans were beautiful, creative, worthy of friendship. She had convinced her mother, the High Matriarch of the Velthari Dominion, to let her come on this mission. She had wanted to be the first to shake a human hand. Now she drifted among the stars. One more piece of debris from humanity's greatest victory. Her name was Selith. She had loved humanity, and humanity had killed her without ever knowing her name. 3 weeks passed after the Battle of Seoul. The world waited for retaliation that did not come. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka stood at the window of her office on Luna Station, watching Earth rise above the gray horizon. She was 54 years old and had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. She had negotiated peace treaties between nations that hated each other. She had talked terrorists out of killing hostages. She had faced the worst that humanity had to offer and found ways to bring people together. Now she faced something much harder. She faced the unknown. Still nothing? She asked without turning around. Her assistant, a young man named David, checked his datapad for the 100th time that day. Nothing, ma'am. No fleet movements detected. No communications. No probes. It's like they've forgotten about us. They haven't forgotten. Tanaka had been studying everything they knew about the aliens since the battle ended. It was not much. The Velthari, as the translation computers had finally determined they were called, had been known to other species for thousands of years. They were ancient, powerful, and according to the limited information humanity had gathered from neutral sources, generally peaceful. That last part troubled her greatly. "Get me a channel to the Concord station," she said. "I need to speak with Elder Maveth." The Concord were the closest thing the galaxy had to neutral observers. They were a collective of species who had given up war millennia ago. They watched, they recorded, they occasionally offered advice. They did not take sides. They did not fight. They simply existed, patient and calm, in a universe that was rarely either of those things. Elder Maveth was one of their oldest members. He looked like a tree that had learned to walk tall and thin, with bark-like skin and branches that might have been arms or might have been something else entirely. His eyes were golden and deep, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through leaves. "Ambassador Tanaka," he said when the communication connected, "I have been expecting your call. Elder Maveth, I need information. I know what you need." The elder's golden eyes seemed sad. "You need to understand what happened. You need to know why the Velthari have gone silent." "Yes." Tanaka felt her heart beating faster. "Please, tell me." The elder was quiet for a long moment. In the background of the transmission, Tanaka could see other Concord members moving slowly, like plants swaying in a breeze. They all seemed to be looking at her. They all seemed sad. "Ambassador," the elder finally said, "what do you believe happened 3 weeks ago?" "We were attacked. We defended ourselves. We won. Is that what you believe? Or is that what you have been told?" Tanaka frowned. "I saw the sensor data. 800 warships entered our system. They were heading straight for Earth. We asked them to respond, and they didn't. What else could we think? You could have waited. Waited for what? For them to start shooting? For them to destroy our cities?" The elder made a sound that might have been a sigh. "Ambassador, in the history of the Velthari Dominion, which stretches back over 50,000 years, how many times do you think they have attacked another species without warning?" Tanaka did not answer. She did not know. "None," the elder said. "Not once. Not ever. The Velthari are warriors, yes. They have fought terrible wars, but they have never attacked without first attempting communication, without first explaining their intentions, without first giving their enemy a chance to surrender or negotiate. But they didn't communicate with us. We tried to reach them and they didn't respond. Did they have time to respond? The question hit Tanaka like a punch to the stomach. She thought about the timeline. The alien fleet had arrived. Humanity had tried to communicate. The translation computers had struggled with the alien language. And then, just a few hours later, the shooting had started. How long? She asked slowly. Does it normally take to establish communication between two species that have never met before? Days, the elder replied. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months. The Velthari are an ancient species with a complex language. Their words carry meanings within meanings. A proper greeting can take hours to deliver. We didn't give them hours. No, you did not. Tanaka sat down heavily in her chair. Her hands were shaking. But their ships, they were heading straight for us. They didn't change course. They didn't slow down. Why would they slow down? They were on a schedule. They had been planning this visit for decades, ever since they first detected your radio signals. They were excited. They wanted to meet you. Meet us? The elder's bark-like face twisted into something that might have been pain. Ambassador Tanaka, the Velthari did not send a war fleet to your system. They sent a greeting armada. It is one of their most sacred traditions. When they discover a new species that has reached a certain level of development, they gather their greatest ships and their finest citizens. They bring gifts. They bring scholars and artists and diplomats. They bring their children, so the young ones can witness the historic moment when two civilizations first touch hands. Tanaka's blood ran cold. Children, the third expeditionary fleet was carrying over 200,000 individuals. Perhaps 30,000 of them were children. Many were the sons and daughters of Velthari nobility. The High Matriarch's own daughter was aboard the flagship. No. Tanaka shook her head. No, that can't be right. They had weapons. Our sensors detected weapons on those ships. The Velthari are a proud people. They never travel unarmed. But did those weapons fire, Ambassador? Did a single Velthari weapon discharge during your battle? Tanaka thought back to the reports. The sensor data. The strange fact that had puzzled everyone but that no one had wanted to examine too closely. The aliens had not fired. Not once. Not even when they were dying. Their weapons were in ceremonial mode, the elder continued. It is a gesture of trust. A way of saying, we are powerful, but we come in peace. We could destroy you, but we choose not to. We offer you friendship instead. Why didn't they defend themselves? Even at the end, when they knew what was happening, why didn't they fight back? Because they could not believe it. The elder's voice was heavy with sorrow. They could not believe that anyone would attack a greeting armada. It has never happened in all the history of the galaxy. Such a thing was unthinkable. By the time they understood what was happening, it was too late. Tanaka put her head in her hands. She felt like she might be sick. The silence, she whispered. That's why they've gone silent. Yes. They're not planning retaliation. They are mourning, Ambassador. The entire Velthari Dominion is in mourning. They have lost 200,000 of their people, including some of their finest minds and most beloved leaders. They have lost works of art that were thousands of years old. They have lost children who had barely begun to live. Oh God, I should also tell you, the elder said gently, that the silence will not last forever. The Velthari are patient, but they are not saints. Eventually the mourning will end. Eventually, they will begin to ask questions. They will want to know why. They will want to know if this was a terrible mistake or a deliberate act of war. And depending on the answer, they'll destroy us. The Velthari Dominion commands a fleet of over 50,000 warships. They have technology that makes your Helios array look like a child's toy. If they decide that humanity is a threat, if they decide that you killed their people on purpose, out of fear or hatred or simple savagery, then yes, they will destroy you. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because they will believe that the galaxy is not safe as long as humanity exists. Tanaka stood up. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stay standing. How long do we have? I do not know. Months, perhaps. A year at most. The mourning period will end, and then they will send someone to find out the truth. What can we do? The elder was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was soft. Tell your people the truth, Ambassador. That is the only advice I can give. The Velthari value honesty above almost everything else. If you try to hide what happened, if you try to justify it or excuse it, they will see through you. But if you go to them honestly, if you admit what you did and why you did it, then perhaps, there is a chance. A chance for what? A chance for understanding. A chance for forgiveness. A chance to prove that humanity is not what this tragedy suggests you are. The communication ended. Tanaka stood alone in her office, looking out at Earth. Somewhere down there, people were still celebrating. They were still calling the Battle of Seoul a victory. They were still treating Admiral Chen Wei as a hero. She had to tell them the truth. She had to tell them that they had not won a battle. They had committed a massacre. They had killed children and scholars and diplomats who had come in peace. They had destroyed a greeting armada, a gesture of friendship that the Velthari had been planning for decades. They had made humanity into monsters. Tanaka reached for her communicator. She had to call the Secretary General. She had to call Admiral Chen. She had to tell them everything. But first, she sat down and cried. She cried for the 200,000 Velthari who had died. She cried for the children who would never grow up. She cried for the High Matriarch's daughter, who had wanted to meet humans so badly that she had volunteered to cross the stars. And she cried for humanity, for the species that had thought it was defending itself, and had instead committed the worst crime in galactic history. When she was done crying, she wiped her eyes and made the call. The celebration was about to end. The real nightmare was about to begin. 3 hours later, Tanaka was on a shuttle heading for Earth. In her briefcase, she carried a data chip containing everything the Elder had told her, plus additional information she had gathered from other Concord sources. The passenger manifests, the diplomatic credentials, the records of what the Velthari had been planning to give humanity as gifts. Technology, art, medicine, knowledge, accumulated over 50,000 years of civilization. All of it was gone now, turned to debris around Jupiter. The shuttle pilot was young, barely 25. He kept looking back at her with excited eyes. "Is it true?" he asked. "Are we going to meet more aliens? Friendly ones this time?" Tanaka looked at him. He reminded her of her nephew, who had died 3 years ago in a training accident. So young, so hopeful, so sure that the universe was a place where courage and determination could overcome anything. "I don't know," she said. "I really don't know." The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere. Below, cities sparkled with lights. People were still in the streets, still celebrating. Flags flew from every building. Screens showed Admiral Chen's face on an endless loop, along with images of the battle and the destroyed alien fleet. "Victory," the headline screamed. "Humanity triumphant. Earth defended." In a few hours, all of that would change. In a few hours, the world would learn what it had really done. And then the real question would begin. What kind of species did humanity want to be? Tanaka closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for what was coming. The hardest conversations of her life. The hardest truths she would ever have to tell. The shuttle landed. The doors opened. And Ambassador Yuki Tanaka walked out into a world that did not yet know it had blood on its hands. But it would know soon. It would know everything. The conference room in Geneva was silent. 20 of the most powerful people on Earth sat around a long table, staring at Ambassador Tanaka as if she had just set the building on fire. In a way, she had. Secretary General Maria Santos spoke first. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "You're telling us that we killed 200,000 innocent beings, diplomats, artists, children, people who came to welcome us to the galaxy." "Yes," Tanaka said. "That is exactly what I'm telling you. That's impossible." General Morrison, the American military commander, shook his head. "They were heading straight for us. They had weapons. What were we supposed to think?" "You were supposed to wait," Tanaka replied. "You were supposed to try harder to communicate. You were supposed to give them more than 6 hours before you started shooting. 6 hours is an eternity in battle. It's nothing in diplomacy." Admiral Chen Wei sat at the far end of the table. He had not spoken since Tanaka began her presentation. His face was gray, and his eyes seemed to be looking at something very far away. "The passenger manifests," he said quietly. "You said you have passenger manifests?" "Yes." "Show them." Tanaka hesitated. "Admiral, I don't think." "Show them." She pressed a button on her datapad. The holographic display in the center of the table came to life, filled with names and faces. Alien names. Alien faces, but faces nonetheless, eyes and mouths and expressions that were clearly capable of joy and sadness and fear. The first page showed the diplomatic corps. 80 ambassadors from 12 different species within the Velthari Dominion, each one assigned to establish relations with humanity. Their biographies scrolled beneath their images. Centuries of experience, dozens of successful first contacts, awards and honors and achievements. The second page showed the scholars, linguists who had spent years studying human languages from intercepted radio signals, historians who specialized in young civilizations, scientists who had developed technologies specifically to share with humanity, medical advances, energy solutions, agricultural improvements. The third page showed the artists, painters and musicians and writers who had come to learn about human culture and share their own. Some of them had brought instruments that were thousands of years old. Others had carried original manuscripts of works that were considered treasures throughout the galaxy. The fourth page showed the children. That was when General Morrison looked away. That was when several of the diplomats began to cry. That was when Admiral Chen Wei made a sound like something breaking inside his chest. 30,000 children. Some were babies, carried by their parents on what was supposed to be a historic journey. Some were teenagers, selected through competitive processes to represent the youth of the Dominion. Some were the sons and daughters of nobility, given the honor of witnessing first contact. Their faces filled the display, one after another. Alien faces, yes, but children's faces, full of hope and excitement, and the simple joy of being alive. All of them were dead now. All of them had died screaming or burning or freezing or suffocating in the void of space. All of them had died without understanding why the creatures they had come to meet were killing them. The High Matriarch's daughter, Tanaka said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Selith. She was 16 years old. She had spent 3 years studying human art. She wrote her doctoral thesis on the works of Rembrandt and Vermeer. She wanted to be the first person to shake a human hand. The display showed a young Velthari female. Her skin was pale blue, and her eyes were large and silver. She was smiling in the image, holding a datapad that showed a reproduction of a famous painting. We found her body among the debris, Tanaka continued. She was still holding her research. She died clutching her study of human art. Admiral Chen stood up so suddenly that his chair fell over. He walked to the window and stood with his back to the room. His shoulders were shaking. Why didn't they tell us? He asked. Why didn't they explain what they were? They tried, Tanaka said. The Concord Elder showed me the transmissions. The Velthari were broadcasting their intentions on multiple frequencies from the moment they arrived, but their language is complex. It takes days to translate properly. We didn't give our computers enough time. We asked them to respond. They didn't respond. They did respond, Admiral. They responded immediately. But their response was a formal greeting, a ceremonial welcome that takes hours to deliver. By the time they finished the first paragraph, we were already shooting. General Morrison slammed his fist on the table. This is insane. We had 18 hours. We had to make a decision. What were we supposed to do? Wait and see if they started killing us? Other species have faced the same situation, Tanaka replied. Do you know what they did? They sent a small delegation to meet the approaching fleet. They asked for time to understand. They showed good faith, and in return, the Velthari showed them wonders beyond imagination. We didn't know that. No, we didn't. Because we never asked. Because we were so afraid of the unknown that we shot first and asked questions never. Secretary General Santos raised her hand for silence. The room fell quiet. She looked around at the faces of the people who had led humanity through its first contact with alien life and its first atrocity. What happens now? She asked. What do the Velthari intend to do? I don't know, Tanaka admitted. The Concord Elder says they're in mourning. He says the mourning period could last months. But after that, she took a deep breath. The Velthari Dominion has 50,000 warships. They have technology we can't even imagine. If they decide that humanity is a threat to the galaxy, if they decide that we killed their people out of hatred or malice, they will destroy us. Completely. There won't be a second chance. And if they decide it was a mistake, then there might be hope. The Velthari value honesty above almost everything else. If we go to them, if we admit what we did and why we did it, then maybe we can find a way forward. General Morrison laughed bitterly. Go to them? Go to the people whose children we murdered? And say what? Sorry, we thought you were here to kill us, so we killed you first? Yes, Tanaka said. That's exactly what we say. Because it's the truth. The room erupted into argument. Some demanded that humanity prepare for war, build more ships, develop better weapons, find a way to fight back against the coming retaliation. Others called for immediate diplomatic contact, no matter the risk. Others simply sat in shock, unable to process what they had learned. Admiral Chen remained at the window, silent and still. Finally, Secretary General Santos called for order. "We need to make a decision," she said. "Not today, this is too much to process today. But soon, very soon, we need to decide what kind of species we want to be. Do we prepare for war? Do we seek peace? Do we hide and hope they forget about us?" "They won't forget," Tanaka said. "The Velthari never forget. They live for thousands of years, and they remember every kindness and every cruelty. If we hide, they will find us. If we fight, they will destroy us. Our only chance, our only hope is to face them honestly and accept the consequences of what we've done. And if the consequences are our extinction..." Tanaka was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that no one expected. "Then maybe that's what we deserve." The meeting ended without resolution. People filed out in silence, each one carrying the weight of knowledge that would change everything. Some went to pray, some went to drink, some went to cry in private. Admiral Chen did not move from the window. When the room was empty except for him and Tanaka, he finally spoke. "I gave the order," he said. "I told them to fire. All those children, I killed them. You didn't know. Does that matter?" He turned to face her. There were tears on his cheeks. "I spent my whole life preparing to defend Earth. I trained for decades. I studied every scenario. And when the moment came, I made the worst possible choice. I could have waited. I could have sent a delegation. I could have done anything except what I did. You were afraid. We all were. Fear isn't an excuse, not for this. Not for 30,000 children." Tanaka walked to him and put her hand on his arm. "No," she said. "It's not an excuse, but it is an explanation. And maybe it's something the Velthari can understand. They've been afraid too. At some point in their history, they've made mistakes too. They're not gods. They're just people who've been around longer than us. You really think they might forgive us? I don't know. But I think we have to try. And I think you have to be the one to do it." Chen stared at her. "Me? You're the one who gave the order. You're the one who has to own it. If we send diplomats, people like me, the Velthari will think we're trying to hide. But if we send you, the person responsible, the person who carries the most guilt, that means something. That shows them we're not running from what we did. They'll kill me. Maybe. Probably. But if there's even a chance that your death can save humanity, that your honesty can show the Velthari who we really are, isn't that worth it?" Grand. Admiral Chenwei looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere out there, among the distant stars, a grieving civilization was deciding whether humanity deserved to exist. Somewhere out there, the wreckage of 200,000 innocent beings drifted in the cold darkness of space. He thought about his daughter, his unborn grandchild, the world they would inherit if he did nothing. Then he thought about Selith, the young Velthari who had loved human art. He imagined her in her final moments, watching human missiles streak toward her ship, not understanding why the creatures she had admired were trying to kill her. He owed her something. He owed all of them something. "I'll go," he said. "When the time comes, I'll go to them. I'll tell them everything. And I'll accept whatever judgment they give." Tanaka nodded. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say he was brave. She just squeezed his arm and walked away. Admiral Chenwei stayed at the window until dawn, watching the stars and waiting for the morning to end. The revelation had been made. The truth was known. Now came the hardest part, living with it. The news broke 3 days after the Geneva meeting. Someone leaked the passenger manifests. Within hours, every screen on Earth showed the faces of the dead. Admiral Chen Wei watched the reaction from his apartment in Singapore. He had not left the building in 2 days. He had not slept in 3. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the children, 30,000 children, each one with a name, a family, dreams for the future, all of them gone because of an order he had given in fear. The protests began slowly. A few hundred people in Berlin, holding signs that read, "We are murderers," and "Justice for the Velthari." Then a few thousand in Tokyo, then tens of thousands in New York, London, Mumbai, Sao Paulo. Within a week, Millions of people were in the streets, demanding answers. The world had celebrated Chen as a hero. Now they called him a monster. "They're burning your picture," said his daughter Mei Lin, who had come to stay with him when the threats began. "There's a crowd outside right now. Security says they can hold them. But they might not be able to hold them forever." Mei Lin was quiet. She was 7 months pregnant now, and Chen could not look at her belly without thinking about all the unborn children who had died on those ships. Velthari babies who would never take their first breath. Velthari families who would never exist. "Dad," Mei Lin said softly, "this isn't your fault. Not entirely. You made a decision based on the information you had. Any commander would have done the same." "No." Chen shook his head. "That's what I told myself at first. But it's not true. I could have waited longer. I could have sent a scout ship to investigate. I could have done 1,000 things differently. Instead, I chose the easiest option. Shoot first, ask questions later. You were trying to protect us. I was afraid, that's all. I was afraid of the unknown, afraid of losing control, afraid of looking weak. And because of my fear, 200,000 people died." He stood up and walked to the window. The crowd outside was growing. He could hear them chanting something, but he could not make out the words. It did not matter. He knew what they were saying. He knew what he deserved. "The funeral reports are coming in," Mei Lin said, looking at her datapad. "From the Velthari worlds. The Concord is sharing everything. Read them to me." "Dad, you don't need to. Read them." Mei Lin took a deep breath and began to read. The Velthari mourned differently than humans. When someone died, their family and friends would gather and share memories. They would tell stories about the person who was gone, their kindnesses, their achievements, their small daily moments of beauty. They would do this for days, sometimes weeks, until every memory had been spoken and recorded. For 200,000 dead, the mourning would take years. The first funeral report was for a scholar named Tirath, who had spent 4 centuries studying young civilizations. He had written 37 books about the early development of intelligent species. He had believed that humanity showed particular promise, that they might become something special, given time and guidance. He had volunteered for the greeting armada because he wanted to see human faces in person, to look into their eyes and see the spark of potential he had studied for so long. The second report was for a musician named Velis, who had been the greatest composer in the Dominion for 300 years. She had listened to human music, Mozart, Beethoven, jazz, rock and roll, and had been moved to tears by its raw emotion. She had spent 10 years writing a symphony that blended Velthari and human musical traditions. She had planned to perform it for humanity as a gift. The symphony was lost now, along with the only person who remembered how it was supposed to sound. The third report was for a family of 5, 2 parents and 3 children who had won a lottery to be part of the greeting armada. They had been common people, not nobles or scholars. The father had been a teacher, the mother had been a doctor. Their children had been 9, 12, and 15 years old. They had spent the entire journey to Seoul talking about what humans might be like, imagining the friends they might make. The reports went on and on. Hundreds of them, thousands of them. Each one a life that had been full of meaning and purpose and love. Each one ended by human weapons. Admiral Chen listened to all of them. He did not look away. He did not ask Mei Lin to stop. He forced himself to hear every name, every story, every loss. This was the weight he had to carry. This was what he had done. When Mei Lin finally finished reading, hours later, Chen sat in silence for a long time. Then he said something that made his daughter gasp. "I need to see them." "What?" "The bodies, the wreckage, everything we collected from the battle. I need to see it." "Dad, that's not possible. The site is restricted." "The government. I'm still technically the commander of Earth Defense. I can get access." "Why would you want to do this to yourself?" Chen looked at his daughter with eyes that seemed to have aged a decade in 3 weeks. "Because I need to remember. Because if I'm going to face the Velthari, if I'm going to ask for their forgiveness, I need to understand exactly what I'm asking forgiveness for. I need to see the faces of the people I killed." The next day, Admiral Chen took a shuttle to the debris field. It was still there, spreading slowly outward from Jupiter. A graveyard of twisted metal and frozen bodies. Recovery teams had been working for weeks, but they had barely made a dent. There was so much wreckage, so many dead. The shuttle moved slowly through the field. Chen sat at the window and watched. He saw the broken hulls of ships that had been designed for beauty, not war. He saw furniture and artwork and personal belongings, all frozen and drifting. He saw bodies, so many bodies. Velthari did not look like humans. Their skin was blue or purple or silver. Their eyes were large and strange. Their limbs were longer, their bodies thinner, but their faces showed emotions that Chen recognized all too well. Fear, confusion, pain, sorrow. The shuttle pilot spoke through the intercom. "Sir, we're approaching the flagship, or what's left of it." The flagship had been 3 kilometers long, the largest and most beautiful ship in the greeting armada. It had been designed to impress, to show humanity the wonders that the Velthari could achieve. Now it was a shattered ruin, broken into 1,000 pieces by human weapons. Among the pieces, recovery teams had found the bodies of the High Matriarch's delegation. They had been gathered in a central chamber when the attack began, preparing the formal greeting they would deliver to humanity. They had died together, still holding the gifts they had planned to offer. And among them, they had found Selith. "Stop the shuttle," Chen said. The pilot obeyed. Through the window, Chen could see a recovery pod attached to a piece of debris. Inside the pod was a body covered with a silver sheet. "Is that her?" Chen asked. "Is that the High Matriarch's daughter?" "Yes, sir. We were going to transport her back to Earth for study, but the government hasn't decided." "No study." Chen's voice was firm. "She's not a specimen. She's a person. She deserves to go home." "Sir, the Velthari haven't requested the return of bodies. They haven't communicated at all. Then we'll send her anyway. We'll send all of them. Every body we can recover. Every artifact. Every personal item. Everything. We'll gather it all and we'll bring it to the Velthari ourselves." "Sir, that could be seen as what? An apology? A gesture of respect? Good. That's exactly what it should be." Chen stayed in the debris field for 6 more hours. He made the recovery teams show him everything. Every body, every artifact, every piece of evidence of the lives that had been lost. By the time he returned to Earth, he was a different man. The fear that had driven him to give the order, the fear of the unknown, the fear of looking weak was gone. In its place was something else, something harder to name: responsibility, purpose, determination. He would not hide from what he had done. He would not make excuses. He would not let humanity pretend that this was someone else's fault. When he landed, he found a message waiting for him. It was from Ambassador Tanaka. "The mourning period is ending," she said. "The Velthari have announced that they will send a delegation to Seoul in 3 months. They want to meet us. They want to understand what happened and why." 3 months. That was all the time humanity had to prepare. Chen began making plans. The suicide started 2 weeks later. Veterans who had fought in the Battle of Seoul, who had pulled triggers and launched missiles without knowing what they were shooting at. They had been heroes. Now they knew they were killers. The first was a young pilot named James Chen, no relation to the admiral, who had destroyed 6 Velthari ships with his fighter. He left a note that said only, "I can't live with what I've done. Please forgive me." The second was a weapons officer from one of the orbital platforms. She had fired 32 missiles during the battle. Now she knew that each missile had killed dozens of innocent beings. The third was a teenager who had never been in the military at all. He had watched the battle on television and cheered when the alien ships exploded. Now he could not stop seeing the faces of the children he had celebrated killing. Admiral Chen attended every funeral. He spoke at some of them. He told the grieving families that their loved ones were not to blame, that they had followed orders, that they had believed they were defending Earth. But his words felt hollow, even to himself. How could he tell others they were not to blame when he carried all the blame himself? The world was changing. The celebrations had ended. The flags had come down. In their place was something new, a collective shame that hung over humanity like a fog. People stopped looking at the stars with wonder. Now they looked with fear and guilt. What were we? The world asked itself. What have we become? And beneath that question, another one. What can we do to make this right? Admiral Chen thought he knew the answer. It was not weapons. It was not defense. It was not preparation for war. It was honesty. It was humility. It was a willingness to stand before the people they had wronged and say, "We did this. We are sorry. We will accept whatever judgment you give." 3 months. That was how long they had to learn how to be a different kind of species. Chen hoped it would be enough. The Velthari delegation arrived exactly 3 months after the announcement. This time, There were only 3 ships. They were small and gray, and carried no decorations. They moved slowly, giving humanity plenty of time to see them coming. This time, no one fired. Admiral Chen Wei stood at the airlock of Luna Station, waiting. He had not slept the night before. He had spent the hours looking at photographs of his family, his daughter, his wife who had died 5 years ago, his father who had taught him to believe in duty and honor. He had written letters to each of them, saying goodbye. He did not expect to survive this meeting. Behind him stood Ambassador Tanaka and a small group of humans who had volunteered for the delegation. No soldiers, no weapons, just people who believed that humanity needed to face what it had done. They had brought something else too. In the cargo hold of the station were the bodies they had recovered from the debris field, over 50,000 of them, each one carefully preserved and prepared for return to their families. They had also brought the personal belongings, the artwork, the cultural artifacts, everything that could be saved. It was not enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. The airlock opened with a hiss. The first Velthari to enter was old. Her skin was deep purple, and her eyes were golden like distant suns. She moved slowly, as if every step cost her something. Behind her came 2 younger Velthari, their faces blank and unreadable. Admiral Chen recognized the old one from the briefing materials. She was the High Matriarch herself, leader of the Velthari Dominion, mother of the girl Chen had killed. She had come in person. She had come to look into the eyes of the man who had murdered her daughter. Chen stepped forward. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to stay standing. He had practiced this moment 1,000 times in his mind, but now that it was here, all his words seemed meaningless. High Matriarch, he said. My name is Chen Wei. I am the one who gave the order to fire. I am the one responsible for the deaths of your people. I am the one who killed your daughter. The matriarch looked at him. Her golden eyes seemed to see through him, past his uniform, past his skin, down to whatever was at the center of his being. She did not speak. I have no excuses, Chen continued. I was afraid. I saw your ships coming and I assumed the worst. I did not wait long enough. I did not try hard enough to understand. I made a decision in fear. And because of that decision, 200,000 innocent people died. Still, the matriarch said nothing. The silence stretched on, heavy and terrible. I know that nothing I say can undo what I did, Chen said. I know that nothing can bring back your daughter or any of the others. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand who they were. I understand what they came to do. And I will spend the rest of my life, however long or short that might be, trying to become worthy of the gift they were trying to give us. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. This contains everything we know about Seleth. The research she did, the art she loved, the dreams she had. We collected it from the debris. We thought her mother might want to have it. He held out the chip. His hand was trembling. The matriarch looked at the chip for a long moment. Then she reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed against Chen's palm, and he felt something pass between them, not forgiveness, exactly, but something else. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. You came, the matriarch said. Her voice was deep and musical, though heavy with grief. You came yourself, the one who gave the order. You did not hide. You did not send others in your place. No, Chen said. This was my responsibility. No one else should bear it. Do you know what would have happened if you had hidden? If you had sent diplomats with practiced speeches and careful words? You would have destroyed us. Yes. The matriarch nodded slowly. We would have believed that humanity was a species of cowards and liars. We would have believed that you killed our children and felt no shame. We would have wiped you from the galaxy. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. A species that cannot face its own crimes is a danger to everyone. And now? The matriarch was quiet for a long time. She looked at the data chip in her hand. She looked at the humans standing behind Chen, the small, fragile creatures who had volunteered to face the wrath of an empire because they believed it was right. She looked at Chen himself, standing tall despite his obvious fear, accepting full responsibility for everything that had happened. Now, she said finally, I see something different. I see a species that makes terrible mistakes, but I also see a species that is capable of learning, capable of shame, capable of growth. She turned to her attendants and spoke in her own language, a flowing, musical series of sounds that the human translators struggled to follow. One of the attendants nodded and stepped forward, carrying a small box. This was Selith's, the matriarch said. She made it when she was a child, her first attempt at human-style art, a painting of a sunrise. She said that humans were the first species she had found who understood why sunrises were beautiful. She opened the box. Inside was a small canvas, covered in bright colors that somehow managed to capture the exact feeling of watching a new day begin. It was crude by Velthari standards, a child's work, but it was also beautiful. It was also full of hope. I brought this to show you, the matriarch said. To show you what she saw in you. She believed that humanity was capable of great beauty. She believed that you were worth knowing, worth befriending, worth crossing the stars to meet. Tears were running down Chen's face. He did not try to stop them. She was wrong, of course, the matriarch continued. The humans who killed her were not beautiful. They were afraid and violent and stupid. But perhaps, she paused, perhaps you are not only those things. Perhaps you are also the species that Selith believed in. Perhaps you can become what she hoped you would be. We will try, Chen said. I swear to you we will try. That is all I ask. The matriarch carefully closed the box. I cannot forgive you, Admiral Chenwei. Not today. Perhaps not ever. My daughter is dead, and no words can bring her back. But I can choose not to destroy you. I can choose to give your species a chance to prove that Selith was right about you. She turned to Ambassador Tanaka. We will establish formal relations. There will be rules. There will be conditions. You will never again make the mistake of firing before you understand. You will learn our language and our customs. You will teach us yours, and perhaps, in time, the wound between our peoples will heal. And the bodies? Tanaka asked. The artifacts? We brought everything we could save. The matriarch's eyes softened just slightly. That was unexpected. Most species would have kept them, studied them, displayed them as trophies. You chose to return them. They weren't ours to keep. No, they were not. The matriarch nodded. We will take them home. We will give them proper rest. And we will remember that humanity, whatever else it might be, is capable of this, of respect for the dead, of honor, even in disgrace. The meeting lasted for several more hours. Details were discussed. Agreements were made. The foundation was laid for a relationship that would take generations to build. When it was over, the matriarch turned to leave. But at the airlock, she stopped and looked back at Admiral Chen. You expected to die today, she said. You came here believing I would kill you. Yes. Why did you come anyway? Chen thought about the question. He thought about his daughter and his unborn grandchild. He thought about the world they would inherit. He thought about Selith, who had loved humanity without ever meeting them. Because someone had to, he said. Because if I wasn't willing to die for what I believed in, then I wasn't worthy of asking others to live by it. And because, he paused, because your daughter believed in us, I wanted to prove that she wasn't wrong, even if it cost me everything. The matriarch looked at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since she had arrived, something changed in her face. It was not a smile, not exactly, but it was something close. My daughter would have liked you, she said. She would have wanted to be your friend. Then she turned and walked through the airlock, and the door closed behind her. Admiral Chenwei stood alone in the corridor. He was still alive. Against all odds, against all expectations, he was still alive. Humanity was still alive. And now came the hard part. Now came the work of becoming the species that Selith had believed they could be. 1 year later, humanity established the first contact protocols, a set of rules that would govern every future encounter with alien life. The rules were simple. Wait, listen, understand, never fire first, never assume hostility, give the unknown the benefit of the doubt, even when it was frightening, even when every instinct screamed to attack. The protocols were carved into a memorial station that orbited Jupiter, right at the edge of the debris field that still drifted there. The station contained 200,000 names, every person who had died in the greeting armada. Beneath the names was a simple message. We did not understand. We were afraid. We made a terrible mistake. But we will learn. We will grow. We will become better. In memory of those who died, we promised to be worthy of the friendship they offered. Admiral Chenwei visited the station every year on the anniversary of the battle. He would stand before the names and read them aloud, one by one, until his voice gave out. It took him 3 days to read them all. His daughter, Mei Lin, came with him sometimes. So did his grandson. who was named Selith, a human boy with an alien name, a living promise that the two species would never forget what had happened between them. The Velthari came too. Not many at first. The wounds were too fresh, the grief too raw. But over time, more and more of them made the journey to Sol. They came to see the memorial. They came to meet the humans who had killed their loved ones and then spent years trying to make it right. Some of them found peace. Some of them found friendship. A few of them even found love bonds between humans and Velthari that would have seemed impossible in the days after the battle. The High Matriarch came once, near the end of her life. She was over 3,000 years old by then, and she had spent the last decades of her existence watching humanity change. She had seen them stumble and fail and pick themselves up again. She had seen them reach out to other species with patience and humility, applying the lessons they had learned in the worst way possible. She stood before the memorial and read her daughter's name. Then she turned to Admiral Chen, who stood beside her, older now but still carrying the same weight he had carried since that day in Geneva. "I was wrong," she said. "About what?" "I said I could never forgive you. I said the wound might never heal." She looked at the names on the wall, the people she had lost, the people humanity had killed. Then she looked at the station, at the protocols, at the universe that had changed because of what happened here. "I was wrong," she said again. "The wound has healed. Not perfectly, there will always be a scar, but it has healed. And you," she looked at Chen, "you have become what my daughter believed you could be." Admiral Chen Wei did not know what to say, so he said nothing. He just stood there, in the station named for the people he had killed, and let the silence speak for him. The High Matriarch died 6 months later, peacefully, surrounded by her family. In her final moments, she asked to see the painting that Selith had made as a child, the one of the human sunrise. "She was right," the matriarch whispered, looking at the bright colors. "They were worth it. They were always worth it." And far away, on a planet called Earth, a species that had once made the worst mistake in galactic history, continued the slow work of becoming something better. They would never be perfect. They would never stop making mistakes. But they would keep trying. They would keep growing. They would keep reaching out to the unknown with open hands instead of closed fists, because that was what Selith had believed they could do. And in the end, she was right.